From Chicago's CAN TV, a look at the week's events is reported in the newspapers, in the blogs and online, and on radio and TV. This is Chicago Newsroom.
Hi again. Welcome to the show on this March 14th, 314. Happy Pi Day. So when the white smoke floated from that chimney yesterday, it had great symbolism, but it certainly wasn't traditional. You know, they still burn their ballots in an old cast iron stove that was first installed in the 1930s. But right next to it, according to news reports, there's a brand new electronic gizmo connected to the same flue. So this new stove with its LED indicator lights is packed with chemical charges that create white smoke. And it does it by mixing potassium chlorate, lactose, and pine resin. And the chimney itself, the thing that really kind of represents the very essence of the Catholic Church tradition, it was installed by hard-hatted guys up on the roof about 2 weeks ago. So the cardinals, who probably all had smartphones in their pockets and who regularly tweet to their parishioners, have elected a pope who is said to adhere strictly to the original teachings of the Church. Not unlike Justice Scalia in the Constitution, don't you think? But at the time of the founding of the Catholic Church, there were believed to be about maybe 30 to 50 million people on this planet. So it calls to mind a fantasy question. What if the Catholic Church had never been created until, say, March 2013? What if its powerful, all-encompassing 2,000-year reign was going to start this week? Would it have the same attitudes about contraception, given now that there are 8 billion in the world? Would it attempt to envision what life on Earth would look like in 4013? And for that matter, if we could maybe bring the founders back to take another whack at writing a new constitution, how would they feel about slavery? Would they argue for a well-regulated militia? Well, this morning, the Sun-Times' Art Golab has written a fascinating piece about the Chicago Archdiocese and what the Archdiocese is the challenges that it's facing. So he's here to talk with us this morning, and glad to have you on the show. Back again, Art. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Dan.
And also joining us for the first time, the digital editor of the digital editor from the Chicago Sun-Times, Marcus Gilmer, joining us. Marcus, great to have you here. Mark has been blogging for a long time and doing a lot of things in new media, and now the Sun-Times has a bunch of new media folks, and there's still some of us old media folks hanging around too, I guess, Art, right? So Art, your piece today in the Sun-Times, and happy election to the Pope. We're happy to have you. Talking about what's going on in Chicago, one of the things that I thought was really striking was I had no idea how many schools the Archdiocese has closed in the last, 10 years or something?
Since 1985.
Since 85.
On my charts.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been quite a number. I think it's gone down. More than half of the schools have closed. And there's two reasons for that. The attendance is going down because the number of practicing Catholics is going down significantly. It's down by over 200,000 since the 1980 census. While in that same period, the population of Cook County has actually gone up by 200,000 and has had a huge inflow of Hispanics who are Catholic. So what does that mean? That means a lot of people net are leaving the church. And they're not sending their kids to school. They're not as committed. They're not giving as much money at the collection plate. Collections have been down for the last 5 years. They've had problems with having to pay out settlements for priest abuse cases, although they paid out $80 million, which is not nearly as much so far as several other cities that have had to that have had to go bankrupt. So they're facing a number of problems, and but they essentially stem from fewer people showing up in pews and less money coming in.
It's fascinating to me to stay on the schools a little bit, and I know you've done a lot of work on the schools issues. You do a lot of research work for the Sun-Times on that. I grew up at North and Kedzie, and on my block, I think I was the only kid who went to public schools. I mean, virtually everybody went to Catholic schools. That was just where I grew up. But then later on, it wasn't so much, seems to me, it wasn't so much for religion as it was for just sort of other reasons. People were sending their kids to the Catholic schools just as a sort of an alternative to the public schools, and now that has kind of gone away too, apparently.
Well, I think that's actually kind of keeping them going to some degree, because a lot of people don't trust the public schools, and a lot of non-Catholics, I think it's like 15 to 20% of the students in Catholic schools are non-Catholics. So those are people who don't think the public schools are doing the job, and they're willing to pay the Catholic schools to educate their kids. And Catholic schools are a relative bargain among private schools. So I think that's one of the ironically, one of the things that's kind of keeping them afloat is the fact that the public schools are so bad. But the thing that's been hurting them is that the Catholic schools are all over. They're in every neighborhood, and there's been a lot of demographic changes. The neighborhood where you live in is not as Catholic as it grew up. It's not as Catholic as it used to be. There are other neighborhoods that have changed from white to black, and the demographics of black residents are different than white. They're not as many Catholics, and that's happened to maybe a third of the city. So I think that's been a factor too over the time that we've been talking about.
But the chart that you have in today's paper is really interesting when you look at you just sort of look at county by county at the number of Catholics, or I guess it's really kind of two things, isn't it? It's the number of people who are Catholic and the number of people who practice Catholicism. I mean, they sort of have two problems. There are more non-Catholics in the area, and probably more people who are just Catholic but have wandered away from the church.
Well, the data that I'm getting is mainly from surveys, and it's people who say they're Catholic, but they were raised Catholic. They were maybe have been born Catholic. They may have gone to Catholic schools, but do they go to the church every Sunday? A lot of them don't. There's even a word for it in the Catholic Church. They're the kind of people who just go to weddings, funerals, and baptisms. And
the WFB crowd,
something like that.
Yeah,
but the actual numbers are going down, but they're not necessarily indicative of how many people are showing up in church. That's probably even lower.
So do you get the sense that the Chicago Archdiocese is stronger than other big city archdioceses, or just kind of?
Definitely. They have not been hit by the sex abuse scandal as much. The Cardinal George claims that the money they've had to pay out has come from selling excess real estate, so it hasn't affected their budget, although to me that sounds like they're juggling with numbers. That's money that could have gone for other things. But at any rate, and they also have a huge endowment. It's over $1 billion. The problem is they've got $1 billion budget, and they've been running $30 to $40 million deficits for the past 5 years. But what it all adds up to is that they're still relatively healthy, and when they have these deficits, $30, $40 million, they dip into their endowment, and they're worried about that. Their endowment also hasn't been doing that well investment-wise. But $1 billion is nothing to sneeze at. That's a nice little nest egg. Yeah,
and it's also just interesting to see all the other kind of financial challenges that they're facing, because they have a kind of a fleet of very much aging buildings in their churches, and lots of those need $1 million or $2 or $10 or $20 million, and so that's another. They just have all kinds of these sort of problems.
Well, yeah, and that dovetails with another problem they've got. They've got no priests to put into those buildings.
Yes, right.
So what they have been doing is closing and consolidating parishes. There are many parishes that have one pastor serving more than one parish. So they're downsizing, and they're trying to do it as economically and as efficiently as they can. They're running into problems, and now they're saying because of this deficit, it's going to get worse. The money that they give to poor parishes from the central office is going to go down, and that ultimately is going to lead to more closings.
So you wouldn't want that job. You wouldn't want to be the archbishop here, or maybe you would.
It's a tough job, but the interesting thing is Cardinal George is not going to be around. He has resigned, and it's now up to the new Pope to figure out when he wants to appoint a new archbishop or cardinal for Chicago. So he is trying to prepare the ground and trying to offer the new guy the most solid foundation he can. But yeah, we don't envy whoever the new guy is. We don't
Right,
envy
right.
his task.
Yeah. All right. Well, Marcus, by the way, welcome to the show.
As one of those non-Catholics in Chicago,
Right.
I don't have much to say. That was great watching the Pope yesterday, though.
It was, wasn't it? I mean,
interesting.
I have to say that there's something that I think I'm like maybe millions and millions of other people that I really didn't sort of get all that engaged in the story until the pomp and circumstance and the curtains open and there he is, and it's like everybody else is like, whoa, it's almost like a reality TV show or something, without being disrespectful. It's like, what is this? What are they doing? Who is it going to be?
I was glued to chimney cam.
Were you?
Oh, it was
The chimney
fascinating.
cam. Yeah.
The seagull that came out of nowhere.
Yeah. Well, as we said, it's just interesting to know that the chimney was just installed and it's all electronic. So there you are. So there is so much going on in the news this week as all these different stories advance. But one of the big ones is schools, the Chicago public schools, and the fact that they're now talking about the possibility of closing, who knows, maybe 80 schools or so. I don't know, Art, you're the researcher. Do you buy that? You think they're going to do it? You think they're going to close that many?
It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. It's already causing a lot of outrage and a lot of dissension. And if they actually do it, I know for a fact it's going to cause a lot of problems.
Yeah.
There are so many things that could result from this, but one of the main problems is gangs.
Yeah.
They close schools. Kids are going to be going into different neighborhoods. They're going to be going. It's going to cause conflict between kids who are associated with different gangs, and that's just one of the problems. The other problem is larger classroom size.
Well, yeah.
And they're actually coming out and saying 40 kids in a class is not so bad. Well, I got news for you. It's bad.
Yeah.
My colleagues who are education reporters have sat in classrooms with, award-winning, national award-winning teachers who have 35 kids in their classroom, and it's mayhem. It takes 20 minutes to take attendance. It takes 20 minutes to go to the bathroom. By the time you're done getting all that stuff out of the way, your teaching time is cut in half. It just multiplies the difficulty of being a teacher, and I don't see how they're going to get away with it.
I found that interesting because that quote was attributed to Becky Carroll, the spokesperson for the board, and since she's been in that job, she has a kind of a white smoke chimney sort of effect. If Becky Carroll says something, then you know that she's kind of like laying the ramp out there for the troops to come running down. And she's the one who kind of like opens it up first. And when she said that about, a good teacher can handle 40 kids, I thought, wow, this is where we're going with this.
Well, they're very much on message. Every person who is in the PR machine of the mayor generally sticks to the message.
Yeah.
So, we could say that maybe Becky is being consistent with that.
It's also a ridiculous statement. It's ridiculous. I mean, just like you were talking, 40 kids, I mean, you're talking not only the time spent on administrative tasks, you're talking about trying to teach a lesson. And if the whole purpose is connecting with students, and you've got 40 kids, and they're not all, the variable here is the kids. You're not dealing with 40 well-mannered school children who are sitting there, right. Hands folded, apple on the desk, listening to everything you say.
Kids who are the equivalent of that special teacher.
Yeah, this is such a disconnect in the reality to think that you could do 40 kids. I was in classes of 30 kids in a public school, and that was mayhem. You talk about slipping through the kids who slip through the cracks. We're always lamenting those kids who slip through the cracks. That's happening with 25, 30 kids. Like 40 kids is ridiculous. You're not even going to remember every kid's name in every class.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that's been brought up by I know Eric Zorn mentioned in his column, and others have too, is that this weird inconsistency that our mayor was so hell-bent on getting a longer school day because he wanted to improve the environment for children. He wanted to improve the education acquisition opportunity for children. And then to just be sort of blasé about increasing class size past 30, possibly up as high as 40, would seem like that would be about at least equally degrading to the experience in the classroom, one would think. But
you're right. It's the first proposition of increasing the class day was somewhat questionable to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
I think it suited the mayor and the administration because it was a way that they could say they were doing something, but it hasn't. The part of that whole deal was that they were going to bring in more teachers to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been difficult. It's been difficult.
Right.
They said, we're going to bring in music, we're going to bring in art teachers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we'll know. We're still trying to find out exactly what they've done. But I think they've had trouble filling that longer school day.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got bigger classrooms. That's obviously a negative for better education. Every study says so.
All right, so let's talk about the police sergeant exam. That's another thing that sort of popped into the news this week. A couple of weeks ago, Mayor Emanuel said that he had a model for how he was going to deal with the public service unions, police and fire. The police sergeants had essentially said that they would give up a few things, at least the leadership did, and then the vote came this week and it was just overwhelmingly rejected. Their own leadership was pretty much, I think, embarrassed by this. Where does that leave us now as Mayor Emanuel tries to figure out how to deal with pensions, Chicago-based pensions? What does it all mean?
I think he's going to run into a lot of trouble because you already have issues in Springfield where the downstate legislators are already crying and all these pensions and all these money issues, it's all connected to Chicago, And it's not surprising that the mayor and a police union are not seeing eye to eye on a contract negotiation. We always saw that with Daley. But I think it's just going to be, as he's trying to pass this legislation to adjust the pensions, I think it was a 7-year plan. If he's going to Springfield to try to do that, he's going to find pushback from both the union and from the state legislature. Because, again, those downstate legislatures are not going to be happy when we can't even get pension reform
at the
state level
mm-hmm.
without having to deal not only with this large of a reform, mm-hmm. but also one from Chicago that, so many of those lawmakers are already dead set against and really pushing back on.
Yeah. Art, this is not a factual reportage question. It's really sort of like a bigger picture thing. But is it possible that we've reached a point where the public just won't stand for this kind of stuff anymore? When you see stories that police sergeants can retire at 50 at large part, I don't know, 70%, 75% of their pension, and obviously they're not going to just be going to Florida and playing golf. They're going to go out and get a job at a suburban department or someplace else and get another pension. I mean, where is the reality here with the union leadership? Don't they appreciate the fact that there is a sort of a growing public sentiment against them?
I think that they do realize that, and they realize how that they've got to play it very carefully. But on the other hand, they've got one thing on their side: they're police. They serve and protect. Mm-hmm. They stand between us and the abyss of violence and crime. Yeah. I think they're going to be playing that up. Mm-hmm. And they're going to say, we're out on the streets, basically wearing out our bodies, mm-hmm. chasing people through alleys, getting shot at, getting hurt. Retirement age at age 50 is not a bad idea. And you want younger cops out there on the street
absolutely.
anyway.
Right.
And this is, by the way, part of the deal that we signed. Mm-hmm. And this is kind of a pact between the city and the police that we'll take care of you, mm-hmm. and you'll take care of us. Mm-hmm. That's how I would play it if I were the police. And
certainly the same thing is true for firefighters.
Right.
Exactly the same argument.
But the mayor is a master of PR himself, and he's going to be fighting this battle as well. The public relations battle, saying everything that you said about retiring at age 50. They get full health benefits after they retire. And we can't afford it. And the fact is, the city can't afford it. So something's got to give. And we don't know. The one advantage on the mayor's side is that police can't strike, unlike the teachers.
I've always kind of wondered about this. I mean, this is not something that's new. We've had police for as long as we've had the city, and they've had pensions for a very, very long time. Why is it suddenly not affordable? Is it just because the benefits have risen so quickly over such a short period of time, or what? Well, I mean, we didn't hear about this in the 80s, in the 70s?
I'm not sure. I mean, I think one of the problems with the teachers is that the school systems were not paying in as much as they should have. The state wasn't contributing its share.
Right.
As far as I know, with Chicago, Chicago has been contributing its share, but but you're right, the expenses have been going up. And one thing to keep in mind is that the police in general have to pay 9% of their own paychecks into this pension, and they're saying, that's our money too.
Right. And this was the deal that I signed a piece of paper and you signed that piece of paper. A pension's a contract.
You can't take our money away from us. But essentially the city is adding money to that too, and the city doesn't want to add as much.
Well, I don't know. Well, this is one we're just going to have to keep watching. Let's talk about Ventra Cards. This is they've sort of suddenly sprung into our consciousness the last couple of weeks. I know the CTA's been talking about them for a while, but now they're becoming reality. We're going to be all living with them in a few months. And I don't know. I mean, the public hearing was very loud, but there were only 60 people there, so it wasn't exactly like thousands and thousands of people were, lighting their torches out in front of the CTA headquarters. Is this Ventra thing a good thing, a bad thing? Does it matter? Should we be agitated about it? Should we allocate some of our outrage to this, or just keep it in the other pockets?
There's plenty to be frustrated about, and it's a good point. 60 people show up at this hearing. A lot more than that are going to be griping 6 months from now when this starts to get phased in. It's pretty ridiculous in that it's a way, even though they said originally that this wasn't going to be, no kind of expenses would be raised from this, and yet somehow they figured out basically to raise fares without raising fares, or force you to buy into a system that maybe you don't want to do. What's wrong with connecting a credit card to your account? Well, there's a large portion of this city who are dependent upon CTA, who maybe don't have a credit or debit card that they can just connect to this, that they can afford to connect to this, or have one at all. Raising the single ride fares, that trying to force you to take this Ventra card, and if you don't like those, well, you can always do the 7 30-day passes, and well, they just hiked those fares 3 months ago. So it's a really sneaky way of forcing our hand and then call it voluntary.
Yeah,
is again ridiculous.
I'll tell you, I'm gonna push back a little bit on this, because if you go to other cities, certainly New York, DC, places like that, they seem to be so many light years ahead of us in the way they handle their fare collection and so forth, where you have your card and you have to use it at the beginning and the end of the ride so that they can charge you by how many stations you've ridden, which seems to me to be a fair thing to do. If you could ride from Howard to 95th Street for the same price that you get on a bus and go 3 blocks. That seems weird to me. So we're going into a more high-tech world where things are going to be handled in a more high-tech sort of way. And why not disincentivize? There's a horrible word, but why not place a disincentive on the things that cost the CTA so much money, which is administering these little fares?
Well, you point that out about riding the entire length of the Red Line, but there are plenty of people who ride 2 or 3 stops to get to work. Maybe it's harder for them to walk that far, and they pay the same fare. Also, the money that that takes a lot of money to implement the technology for the zone fares, which I'm all in favor of. But they're allocating $2 billion to new train cars, which, you look at comparable, I think, other comparable systems who have recently, and it's a little bit more than I think New York just spent on theirs. And New York is also more expensive to ride the train, but why not allocate some of that money? We just have new trains on a couple of the lines. We have new train cars. Maybe these current train cars are just completely out of date, and I'm just not seeing it. I mean, they all smell awful, and gum all over the seat and all graffiti, so it'll take all of maybe a week for that to happen to these new cars, but why not take that money? First of all, I don't even know where this money is coming from. I guess they're really banking on, I know there's a lot of federal funding, but if you're going to spend $2 billion on train cars, then why not allocate some of that money towards, implementing this zone fare system? For me, the way the CTA is just allocating and spending this money is what's troubling, and this coming after cuts, cutting a lot of bus routes, and for their decrowding effort, which basically, I think for train, has brought train service back up to the level that it was before the cuts in 2010.
Right.
Yet we still have less bus service even than we did before that, because remember, they cut a lot of buses then. So
and many more riders.
It's a lot of spin to tell us that, okay, well, in the net gain is actually it's neutral. They put this decrowding spin on it, and we're still not at what we were 3 years ago. And now we're paying more in fares than we were 3-4 years ago, and now you're going to be paying even more unless you use this Ventra system. Which fine. I'm going to end up doing the Ventra system because I have no other.
Because they want you
I voluntarily will choose to use the Ventra
You're going
system.
to voluntarily pay the $5.
Just the allocation. We could do that, $2 billion, but I guess it's more important to have a different kind of train car that smells awful for me to take to work every day.
Hey, some of these train cars were put on the line in 1978, so it's probably time. But anyway, I told you before the show that I wanted to ask you about Taste of Chicago. I don't know why, with all the important stuff going on, it just seemed like was it Bob Fioretti who said he wants to have hearings to see if maybe the time has come to just put this puppy to sleep. Let's just end it. It's horrible. Nobody likes it. Let's just get rid of it. Is that the sentiment here?
From my point of view, I agree. Maybe its time has come.
Yeah.
The one plus out of the more recent iterations of the Taste of Chicago is that they are now charging for the concert entertainment, and they're bringing in better acts. I say keep that part if it's making money.
Yeah.
The food has, in my opinion, always been horrible.
Well, and you look at the entertainment options, like even they're bringing in good acts. You look at some of the acts they've been bringing the last couple of years when they've been charging, and some of them are up to date. Others are more nostalgia acts, and so I think the band Fun was the headliner, and that's a very relevant, very young band that's popular with the kids these days. And so they're coming in, and that's great if you can do that for a couple of days, but you also have so many street festivals, Pitchfork Festival, Lollapalooza as far as music goes, Summerfest up in Milwaukee. So you have a lot of different options available to residents of Chicago, and it's going to be hard to get them to come, so you're appealing to a suburbanite population, and I don't know. I guess I'm a city dweller when I just less people on the. But I'm with Art here.
So 2 votes for kill the thing. All right. Well, I guess that's going to take us to the end of the program here today. I want to thank you guys both for being here. It was really fun having you here, and I hope you come back again, Marcus.
Absolutely.
And of course, Art, you're one of the founding members here, so we'll have you back any old time. You've been watching Chicago Newsroom. It's a community service of CAN TV, and you can find us anytime right on CAN TV, or you can watch us at your leisure at this address that you see on your screen right now. You can also check us out on iTunes. We have a podcast, video, or audio, so check that out too. Want to thank Art Golab, and want to also thank Marcus Gilmer for being on the program today. I'm Ken Davis. See you next week on Chicago Newsroom.